ever been told you have borderline personality disorder, but deep down it just doesn't sit quite right? Like maybe the label made sense at the time. You were dysregulated, emotions were difficult, you might have been struggling with relationships, but something about that diagnosis now feels a little off. So, what if it looks like BPD, but it's actually complex trauma? And this is way more common than people realize, especially for folks who also are diagnosed with autism, ADHD, or have long histories of being really emotionally invalidated. So, let's break it down so you can understand what's actually going on inside you. So let's start here. Borderline personality disorder and complex PTSD can look really, really similar on the outside, but they're just not the same thing. Now, BPD is best understood through this theory we call the biosocial theory. This means that you're born with a highly sensitive nervous system. Emotions come up fast and hard, and they're long lasting. And when that sensitivity is met with chronic invalidation from your environment, like being told that you're too much, or you're a drama queen, or an attention whore, or you're punished for showing emotions, it creates kind of this deep dysregulation over time. It's important to remember that BPD is not a character flaw. It's what happens when an emotionally sensitive person meets an environment that just didn't know how to teach them to regulate emotions. Now, CPTSD or complex PTSD is a trauma response that builds slowly over time. It's not a single event. It's years of kind of bracing yourself and living in survival mode, walking on eggshells, and learning not to trust anyone, especially yourself. It doesn't even exist as a standalone diagnosis in the United States, though it is recognized internationally. Here, it often gets folded into PTSD or misdiagnosed as borderline personality disorder. So, what's the biggest difference? BPD is rooted in emotional dysregulation and kind of fear of abandonment, attachment wounds. Now, on the other hand, CPTSD is rooted in long term exposure to threat and the coping mechanisms that come with that. So let's do some comparing and contrasting between BPD and complex PTSD. And I want to zoom in on the emotional differences. So let's look at BPD over here, CPTSD over here. First thing we're going to talk about is emotional response. With BPD, it's going to be sudden and overwhelming typically. And with complex PTSD, it's going to be suppressed or delayed. Now, remember, these are vast generalizations. So it's important to kind of look at these as kind of clues, but not an absolute definition of what's going on here. The next thing I want to look at are triggers. Now, triggers for folks with BPD are typically rejection or fears of abandonment. And with complex PTSD, we're looking at flashbacks or hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is when you're just kind of on alert all the time, looking for something terrible that could happen at any moment. Sounds exhausting, doesn't it? It is. Now, the next thing I want to look at is identity. Now, with BPD, we look at kind of an unstable shifting identity, kind of changes depending on your influences, the people that you're around sometimes. Now, with complex PTSD, on the other hand, it can be kind of numb and fragmented. You're kind of not sure who you are. Now, let's look at anger. With BPD, it can feel really, really explosive. Like, I just go into this like rage state. Now, with complex PTSD, though, we're kind of looking at internalized or kind of frozen anger. It's too scary to let it out, so it just kind of sits there and maybe doesn't always get acknowledged. And let's look at the category of self perception. So, somebody with BPD might kind of have a belief about themselves that I'm too much. People can't handle me. Now, with complex PTSD, though, generally kind of that internal perception is I'm not safe. There's always something bad that could happen around any corner. Now, the next thing is reactions. So, how does somebody with BPD or complex PTSD react to different stimuli? So, reactions for folks with BPD tend to be kind of impulsive, and they are often triggered by relationships. That kind of if I feel like you're judging me or I feel like you might leave me, I might have a really impulsive reaction to that. It's utterly terrifying for me. Now, if I have complex PTSD, though, those kind of reactions in similar situations might be dissociating or withdraw. It's kind of flipping the off switch, going away instead of being present. It's kind of like a safety button. It's like it's too much for me. I press the button and I go away. I dissociate. So here's a quick metaphor that maybe might be helpful. BPD can kind of feel like an emotional playlist that's on shuffle: joy, rage, grief, panic, all in the course of a single day. And you don't have control over the skip button, it just plays out. Whereas complex PTSD feels more like trying to play a song, but maybe nothing comes out, or the sound is muted, or the volume's so loud it just feels like static. And here's a question I often ask my clients: do you spiral because somebody pulled away? Or do you go numb and shut down entirely? And that kind of difference is because BPD pain kind of sounds like, why are they leaving? Do they still love me? And I feel like I need to do anything to keep them close. Whereas complex PTSD pain kind of sounds like, I can't trust. I am so tired of being hurt. I feel nothing, but I know I'm not okay. And both can involve emptiness, shame, and explosive emotion. But the core driver is different. BPD is relational pain rooted in fear of being abandoned, and CPTSD is survival pain rooted in feeling unsafe in the world. So, can you have both borderline personality disorder and complex PTSD? Yep, absolutely. And many people do, especially those who are neurodivergent, like they're autistic or they have ADHD and grew up in environments that never felt safe. So you might feel emotions like a BPD storm and shut down like a trauma survivor. You might crave connection like it's oxygen, but then when it's there, find it uncomfortable or suffocating. So, for example, you might be afraid they'll leave you, but when they get close, you kind of panic. You want to open up, but your body kind of won't let you. Now, this is important. That doesn't make it that there's something wrong with you. It makes it that you're adaptive. It means your system is doing exactly what it had to do to survive. Now, it may not be effective now that you're in a different circumstance, though. So, what helps? Well, if this feels familiar, the first step is naming what's really happening, because the right diagnosis leads to the right support. And if you have both, you may need a mix or one and then the other. But it's important to remember that misdiagnosis is going to create a misalignment in treatment. Now, BPD is often helped by DBT, dialectical behavior therapy. That's all around building emotional regulation and interpersonal skills and being able to tolerate distress. Now, complex PTSD may respond better to kind of trauma informed approaches like EMDR or somatic therapy, or while not, necessarily evidence based yet, parts work. And both can benefit from skills around regulating the nervous system. Now, I did make a resource for y'all. And if you're struggling to stay grounded when emotions hit hard or you go completely flat, I have this thing we call the Emotional Regulation Starter Kit. It's linked in the pinned comment and in the description. And I hope you'll get it. It's free. Um, Now, the last thing I want to say to you is if you've been diagnosed or felt like therapy never really quite fit or quite helped, it's not your fault. You're not too much. You're someone who's lived through too much and still found a way to keep going. Let's stop blaming ourselves for the coping strategies that we developed that helped us survive. And we can sure develop new ones. So let me know in the comments. Have you ever felt like your diagnosis didn't match your actual experience? I'd love to hear your story. And not only me, others would love to hear your story because they don't feel so alone anymore. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Take care now. Bye for now.